In 2016, Star Wars fans watched in wonder and fear as the Rogue One squad came together to steal the plans for the Death Star. They did subsequently all kick the bucket before Vader showed up to remind everyone who the real boss is. However, there was one man who Darth Vader was aligned with. One man who didn't fear the Dark Lord himself. But sometimes you just need a guy who gets the job done. Maybe an intimidating Minister for Magic, an enigmatic surgeon at Holby City Hospital no less, or a planet-destroying, weapon-stealing governor. There is no one like that, you say? Well, somebody sounds an awful lot like our guest tonight. We're joined by Grand Moff Tarkin himself, Guy Henry. Guy, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Well, I'm very well. I feel better after that wonderful introduction because I sound fantastic, don't I? I'm really brilliant, kid. Instead of football in CGI makeup.
Never.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show, Guy. You are cemented as a Star Wars legend. And as Matty Boy's already said, you're involved in a lot of different things. I know you've got a Shakespearean past, haven't you? You've been involved in the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Yes, I mean, we don't want to go on and on about it and get the authorities worried, but I have a Shakespearean past, yes. I've shouted in wigs in the evening, that's what we call it, up at Stratford-on-Avon.
That's it.
To be or not to be.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. And it is fantastic to have you on because you are one of the most feared men in the galaxy. And it really was one of those moments. There were rumours going around, Guy, because Matty Boy and I, we kept up to date with rumours of the Rogue One production. We watched it as it unfolded. And we went to Star Wars Celebration in London in 2016 and went to the panels on that. And it was brilliant. It was fantastic. But little did we know we would see Tarkin back. And that was all because of you and the Rogue One team. Now, one of the first questions, I think we should just dive into it. One of the first questions I want to ask you, Guy, was what was it like just being on set and working with someone like Gareth Edwards? What was that like?
Terrifying, really, because I'm not a mimic, and I loved Peter Cushing as an actor, who obviously was the original and wonderful Tarkin in the original film. So I genuinely admired him long before this project Rogue One came along. So the idea of filling his, I was going to say shoes or boots, but of course he wore the carpet slippers on set a lot of the time, as I'm sure everybody knows. But the idea of filling those slippers, boots, whatever they are, it was genuinely daunting. And I mean, I do a better impression of Peter O'Toole, who was in fact my hero. So there's a bit of what I'm supposed to be being Peter Cushing. There's a slight hint of O'Toole creeping in. But no, it's very, very frightening, very daunting. I tell you, though, Gareth Edwards and the whole team couldn't have been nicer. What they are of the first AD, it was a fantastic bunch, very courteous, very kind. So you couldn't wish for more than that, really, if you're frightened.
No, I mean there must have been pressure taking on an iconic role as Tarkin is, but like you say, also stepping into the fluffy footwear of Peter Cushing, OBE, who's a legend in acting anyway, not just in Star Wars. First, how long were you on set for? Because Rogue One obviously had its issues, and I'm sure we'll touch on that shortly. But how long were you on set for? And did you know? I mean, I'm assuming you did, but did you know there was going to be CGI mastery for your face in this film?
Well, I mean, it was not. I don't think it was ever 100% certain. A lot of things about that film. Hello, Walter. That's one of my dogs that's just come in to. Hello, Walter. To my office here. Hello, Walter. Go away. I'm busy. Now they're off. They're barking in the background. See, it's live. I mean, it was never 100% certain, or at least Gareth pretended it wasn't, how they were going to do it. The idea was CGI, full scale, Tarkin would appear, but there was talk of doing it with me with makeup. I mean, real standard max factor 5 and 9 makeup, or this amazing CGI. I like to think of it as somebody, it wasn't me that said it, somebody said it's CGI digital makeup, which I suppose it is, making me look like somebody else, Peter Cushing. Brilliant it is too. But there was lots of different sort of wobbles all the way through. One minute I was wearing lots of dots that were white. Another time I was wearing a sort of mask-like thing. Then I was wearing a sort of Peter Cushing wig because I was a little bit younger than Peter Cushing was when he did it. And anyway, I don't look like him. My hair isn't like his. So, you know, there was quite a bit of experimenting along the way.
How was it that you got the role, can I ask? Because it's a big old role, and from our conversations off here, obviously you said you're not the biggest aficionado of the franchise. So did you have to audition, or were you tapped up?
I didn't audition. My agent, my secret agent, rang and said that now this is a very, very secret thing, I'm telling you, and you're not allowed to know anything about it. I don't know what it is. You're going to have a very secret meeting with a director, and we can't say anything about it. We don't know. And could you turn up at? And they gave the name of one of the most famous media haunts in London. So, of course, they decided to have a very secret meeting in a very public media place. So Gareth Edwards and I sort of talked in whispers at a table. I was very relieved that actually there were some people behind me at the table who happened to be sort of, fans of mine, which he says immodestly. But that was great because here I was being interviewed for this massive project. And I actually had some people, it was as if I planted them there, if I'd given them a fiver and said, will you say I'm a brilliant actor? So they did, but it was as if I'd put them there myself, but I hadn't. So I went to this meeting, and Gareth said that they decided that I would be the right person for it, which is extraordinary, really, because normally for any slightly piddly TV thing or anything these days, you have to leap through the hoops, or whatever the expression, and go on tape and all this. I did go up to Pinewood, I think it was, and do a sort of screen testy thing. They pretended that was only for them to see, and it may well have been only for them, but I suspect that there was a hint of seeing, whether I was really going to be sort of okay. And I think that I had my detractors there. I mean, it's a very, very difficult thing to pull off, and I'm sure some people thought that I was okay, and some people didn't. I remember the Tony Gilroy, who shot some of the stuff for the film, because I think the question you asked, sorry, I drivelled on. I'm very elderly. I can't remember what I'm talking about half the time. But you asked me how long I was there. Well, I was there on and off for a long, long time. They kept saying, "That's it. You finished your role, Guy. You're wrapped. You can go. Thank you very much." And I thought, oh, good, I don't have to be frightened anymore. And then a few weeks later, they call my secret agent back and say, can he come back again? We haven't quite finished.
You just like the leaving parties.
Well, exactly. Tony Gilroy, who directed some of the bits I was in, co-directed them with Gareth or whatever, he obviously thought I was a bit stiff and stilted, and he kept saying to me, dance, right? Dance, it's like a dance. And I thought, I don't remember Peter Cushing dancing, but I know what he meant. He wanted to free me up a bit, I think, and he was very, very good. He was very helpful indeed, but I think he always thought that I was a bit stiff and stilted. So I won't be in his TV series. Yes, it was an amazing experience like that. But it was a straight out offer, and off we went on that adventure, which took, as I say, it must have taken on and off. It must have taken over a year, I suppose, for my bits. I don't know.
Wow. An adventure it was indeed, because I think Rogue One is held on many people's list of favourite Star Wars film. I mean, you walk down the street, you can just point at someone and be like, what's your favourite Star Wars film? And a lot of people might say Empire Strikes Back. But these days, there are a lot of people where it's Rogue One. My friend Dan Sexton, my brother James, favourite Star Wars films now Rogue One. And a big part of that is, and of course, Matty Boy, it's your favourite now, isn't it, mate?
It is, yeah.
It's Rogue One. It has really penetrated pop culture. Like, Rogue One has become so iconic and such a big deal. But one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, obviously, in the prequel trilogy, the Star Wars films that were made from 1999 to 2005, there was a lot of CGI effects, a lot of green screen. And obviously there is some of that in most Star Wars productions. But the modern era, really, Lucasfilm and the guys over at Star Wars, they've really led the way in terms of practical effects. Now, what was your experience with that? Because you're sitting there, you're in these Star Destroyers in these imperial, cold, metal-looking places. What was it like that on set?
Yeah, I mean, that was what was rather nice. Was I had to wear, as you probably know, anyone who's sort of a follower of the films will probably know that I had to wear this motion capture. Basically, I had to wear this extremely uncomfortable, nobody's fault, of course, but it was a good, uncomfortable camera. It has to fit extremely tightly on your head so it doesn't wibble wobble about, so it doesn't half give you a headache. But so you wear that, and you've got these little lights shining in your eyes, and the camera's out in front of you on stalks. So although I was doing all the scenes on the real sets, I mean, they built the sets, they built that. There was wonderful director Krennic. He was, everybody was there. Oh. It wasn't, you weren't acting in a bubble in a green screen thing. It was all on the right sets, which was fantastic. And I'd say the only difficult thing was wearing this. I'd never done anything like it before. I never worked with Andy Serkis, who does it all. I mean, I didn't have any experience of it. And it's a very, very strange experience because you can't forget that you're acting. You can't really lose. I think that's why Tony thought I could perhaps have been a bit looser and a bit more free with it. But it's extremely strange experience being covered in dots with this thing clamped to your head. And yet standing with real people on a real set. Very strange. But no, I was glad to have the real sets there because at least that part you could lose yourself in. You could believe you really were there.
Yeah, it gives you something to act off as well. I'm not an actor, obviously, but I can't imagine it's very easy to act against a green screen with a tennis ball on a stick and having to act against that. I mean, you wouldn't get that in a Midsummer Night's Dream, I tell you. But, so, because obviously you've got this clamped on your head, and I've seen the pictures, and it doesn't look like the easiest thing to manoeuvre, which obviously you've said that. So, with that in mind, Anna, how long did it take to get the expressions of Tarkin and Peter Cushing, but Tarkin and voice, obviously the voice, to a point that you were totally happy with? Because one of my great joys in life is hearing you say, "You may fire when ready." I love replaying that moment. And yes. I just wonder, how long did it take you to get the mannerisms, the look, like the mouth movements, and the voice down?
Well, I just went over and over watching A New Hope, the original, and I had a template line from it, which was the line, hang on a minute, I said I'm old, I can't remember you would prefer another target, a military target, that was a line from the original, and before every take pretty much of this one, I would sort of mutter that to myself to try to get to sound like Peter Cushing, because I don't really. He had a rather high, it was a sort of fluting voice, and as I say, I'm not a mimic, and I don't think it's a perfect impression by any means, but it is, I suppose it's more of a tribute. It's more of a sort of, trying to bring the character to life as best I can, because I can't do him as accurately, quite frankly, as I would have liked. But I tried. I really, really worked at it over and over again, over and over. With the rolled R is an obvious example. I mean, a friend of mine, David Bickerstaff, he's one of the Comic Con agents, looks after me. He loves the finger wagging thing that Peter Cushing used to do, and he said I didn't get enough of that in. It's probably because I was too stiff and frightened. Tony was right. I didn't get enough of the finger wagging, apparently. So yeah, I mean the people who really did the most amazing work, clearly though, after I'd done my bit and tried to be like him and have the same sort of mien, the same sort of bearing as Peter Cushing. they were obviously the people at Industrial Light and Magic and all the special effects people who worked. Poor sods. I mean, they worked over and over again on, listening, watching me and turning me into Peter Cushing, and it took months and months and months. It's not an easy or indeed cheap thing to do in a film, and certainly not as well as they did it. So all that, a lot of that's credit, of course, goes to them.
But without your performance, they don't have that to work on, which is something I wanted to say, because I remember watching Rogue One on the night it came out, because that's what kind of guy I am, rushed out to see it. And you've got the shot of Tarkin looking at the Death Star, and you can kind of see his reflection in the window. And I'm thinking, that's as far as they're going to go with this. Then he turned around, and I've sat forward in my chair like, wow. And then the voice came, and I literally was like, this is incredible. And I went to see it with my missus, and she was like, isn't this guy dead? So it completely fooled her. That's the mannerisms, the voice, and everything. And again, I know so many people who have said that as well. So I think you did a very, very, very good job. Like you say, you don't want to be a mimic. You want to put yourself in there as well. And I thought it did an excellent job. And I was convinced. And again, I rewatched some of the scenes today, and I was like, it's, almost when you put the scenes from A New Hope and Rogue One together, there's not an awful lot of difference. And so, yeah, it's a testament to the work you did, obviously the work that ILM and Lucasfilm did.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm very pleased to hear it.
Do you know what, Matty Boy? I've got a similar experience to what you've just said, where I was up in the Midlands with my family who live up there, my missus' family. I was with my father-in-law, and we watched Rogue One together for the first time. And he do you know what? He loves the original trilogy. He's seen the original trilogy, and he's very aware of the cast, so to say, right? And we're sitting there, we're watching Rogue One, and just the moment that you said, mate, is there's that moment where Tarkin's just looking out the window at the Death Star, and you see the back of his face, and it's like, yeah, that's as far as they're going to go. Mm-hmm. And Neil, that's my father-in-law's name, he says the same thing, and then he turns around and he starts talking. And it takes... I looked at my father-in-law's face, I looked at it, and it took him a good minute to realise, and he gets the remote, he pauses it, he goes, hang on, when was this film made? I was like, yeah, it's 2016. It came out only a few years ago. He's like, how did they do that? What's going on here? And he started going crazy, because I was like, well, there you go. Because what you did, Guy, was exactly what you said. You got the character right. Not necessarily an impersonation of Peter Cushing, or even original Tarkin for that matter. It was your own version of that character. And like Matty Boy says, with the rolling R's and everything, the way you say these things, my personal favourite is when you say effective immediately, or something like that. Like, I'll take over this space, effective immediately. And it's like, yes, the way you say that, it's spot on. It's spot on. That's just a glimpse of the feedback that was received with Tarkin.
Well, that's what I was delighted by. Is I've had the chance to go to some of the conventions and the Comic Cons, and people who genuinely love the films have given me the thumbs up. I'm sure that many people don't like it so much, but I seem to thankfully meet the ones who do. Nobody's come up and said to me, you were rubbish. So I'm thank goodness they haven't. I would have cried. But no, I mean, it's great to feel that people have enjoyed it, because it was so daunting and so frightening to do. It was a big, big challenge. So I'm very, very grateful that it's come over okay. Although I gave my parents, my quite elderly parents, the DVD, modestly, a couple of years ago, which they never watched. They're not Star Wars fans, obviously, but they never even bothered to watch it because I was pretending to be Peter Cushing. And then it was on the television, I think 2 nights ago, or a few nights ago, whenever it was. And I didn't watch it, obviously. And my parents, I think, were going to watch it. Well, I haven't heard a word from them since. They probably disowned me. Probably thought I was terrible. I haven't heard from them. So thank you, Mum. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
The Star Wars community is very, very grateful for it. And the community is very grateful for Rogue One as a film in general. Like I said earlier, it's been very well received, and people adore this film, and it just gets better as the years go on. People just keep going back to Rogue One. But one of the things that was quite famous and really popular around the world with the production of Rogue One was that it had a lot of reshoots, had a lot of cutting, a lot of changing, a lot of chopping. And to this day, we're not even sure on what was left out completely and what was left in. We know there were scenes in even some of the trailers for Rogue One that didn't even make it to the final cut of the film that premiered. So here is a question I have for you, Guy. Is there anything you were in Rogue One that didn't make the final cut?
There was a scene with Darth Vader, and a lovely guy called Spencer Wilding was playing him at the time. I would have liked to have had that bit in. He had to walk backwards, though, up his cloak, up a ramp, and that didn't go very well. So maybe it's very difficult to walk backwards with your cloak
He tripped up
a ramp. Yeah. And I'm a little bit too tall for really, because I'm pretty much as tall as most of the actors who would have played Darth Vader, which Peter Cushing wasn't, but I am too tall, really. And so I didn't even wear carpet slippers in one of the scene with Darth Vader, I think, that got cut. I had no shoes on at all. I was just in my stocking feet. With very bent knees, trying to look a little bit smaller than the beanpole that I am. But I think that was, for some strange reason, that scene was cut.
I would have loved to have seen that scene. Was it a short scene? Was it a long scene? Or do you think it was cut for story reasons, or because Darth Vader fell over?
No. Perhaps I shouldn't. No, never let it be said. He didn't actually fall over. He just wobbled a bit. I think it was cut for story reasons only. I think there was no. They'd have done a version of it where he didn't fall over if they wanted to keep it. And indeed they did. It was only one of the takes where I think he might have slightly stumbled. But and there was I in my socks with my legs bent. But it was it was so complicated, the filming of it, in the sense you had to keep going back and doing different bits. That I didn't know my breakfast from Marble Arch, really, in terms of the story, because there were so many rewrites, but all for the good of the film. It was all to make it that bit better. And I'm so glad they did bother and they did work at it, because it's lovely to hear that it's become one of the most popular Star Wars ever, and that's fantastic to be a part of that.
No, absolutely, it really has done. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, and you've probably heard this many times before, and it's not something which has crossed my mind necessarily, but I know a few people commented on it at the time, and it was because, like we mentioned, obviously Peter Cushing obviously isn't with us anymore, very sadly, and there were a few people kind of raising questions about the ethical side of bringing back an actor or for their performance who's no longer with us. How did that cross your mind at all when Gareth said, "Look, you're going to play Tarkin, but we're also going to essentially superimpose Peter Cushing's face on yours"? Was there a time at all when you thought, I'm not sure about that, or again, was it for the integrity of the film? It was vital and respectful in that sense, or because I've heard a lot of people saying about the ethical side, but I just wanted to get your take on it.
No, I completely understand the ethical question. I think there have been a few occasions where people have unfortunately died during filming where I can't remember.
Oliver Reed in Gladiator.
I think there have been, yes, and a nice younger actor in something. Anyway, they've done it for that reason, and I can sort of see why they're to finish a film, but to start a film on the premise that that's what you're probably going to do, I can understand the ethical queries doubts people might have about that. I think if it were only a gimmick, if Tarkin as a character wasn't so important to that first film, and therefore to its prequel Rogue One, if he wasn't such an amazing character, if it was just a joke or a bit of silliness, then I think that would have been very disrespectful and not worth doing. But that was never in anybody's hearts or minds to make it anything other than an amazing cinematic feat, but also a tribute to the original man and the original character of Tarkin. And, he had to be in that prequel, which was Rogue One. So, and also, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but the trumpet of everybody involved in bringing Tarkin back. When I was at a convention a couple of years ago, apparently somebody said that the lady who had been Peter Cushing's secretary for many, many, many years and was obviously deeply fond of him was taken by the production, I think, to see the film. And she apparently was very moved and said, "Oh, Sir is back."
Wow.
Which I thought was very, very lovely tribute to what everybody did. So if it's true, I'm very grateful for that as well. So if she believed it, if she didn't mind, and they did ask anyone, they didn't take it lightly. They asked Peter Cushing's estate and that lady, Joyce. And I don't think anyone connected with him minded. So, and it was done in all seriousness and with as a tribute to him, because he was a fantastic actor.
He absolutely was, and he's left an indelible mark on British cinema as well as international as well. So again, it must have been, like I said, it's obviously pressure for you to get in that role with all the ethical side of it. But again, without meaning to blow your trumpet, Guy, you did do a hell of a job in bringing the character back.
Thank you very much. Well, it was a great pleasure.
Absolutely. Now, just on the lighter side of things, Guy, we've seen lots of behind-the-scenes images of what happened on Rogue One, stormtroopers at Canary Wharf Station and whatnot, and it looks fantastic. But what I want to ask you is, was there a favourite person for you to be with on the set of Rogue One? Maybe any fun stories from then?
Well, I loved working with director Krennic, very much method actor. He thought Ben Mendelsohn. I loved working with him. Very good fun, but quite doolally. And he threw himself in, and so did I. And we played the scenes full tilt. One scene I was behind the camera, and people probably don't know but often you can see as the actor when you're placed behind the camera and the other actor is acting, past the camera to you. Sort of the eye line is just past the camera lens, but on the camera itself is often a monitor. And, a cardinal sin is that the actor off camera, as it were, behind the camera, looks at the monitor to see how the scene is going from the other actor's point of view. That would be very, very bad. And Ben thought that I was looking at the monitor, and I wasn't, but he didn't half shout at me. Don't look at the monitor. It was all very, 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 we won't go into the full language, but it was quite a moment. And I assured him that I wasn't, and he said he owed me a public apology. And I said, "No, you don't. I don't mind at all. It's don't worry about it." But it was he was great. I loved him, and Andy de la Tour, who was somebody in a uniform as well. I'm very good with the names. And Spencer Wilding was brilliant as Darth Vader. I know I said he had to walk backwards up a ramp. But he was great pleasure. They all were. It was daunting, but exciting and good fun.
Imagine getting to work opposite Ben Mendelsohn like that. That must have been awesome, especially in the scenes that you were in. And I was going to ask you, was that working alongside Ben? Was that your favourite scene, or if you had to pick one moment, one scene that you were in, which you think was the best, if I can say so? What was your favourite scene to work on?
Well, I haven't really watched it for ages, so you're putting me on the spot there. I mean, I know there weren't that many, and I don't sound silly about this, but there were so many takes and so many bits that were perhaps not there, and then we added some more. I mean, it's quite hard to remember them. I think because you've mentioned it, because it's the most amazing moment in the cinema for all the people who love Star Wars. The moment when Tarkin turns round and he and director Krennic have that scene on the bridge, looking at with the Death Star in the background and everything. I think that was probably the the most amazing bit, really. But he was always, a great pleasure to work with him. I think he was great, as I just said. So yeah, I liked it all. But that bit was probably a coup de théâtre, wasn't it?
When that scene, when you turn around, because firstly, point to this question is: had you seen the final footage of yourself as Tarkin before you went to the world premiere? Because obviously you go to the premiere, you're used to seeing yourself on the screen. Obviously, when you're in Harry Potter as Pius, you're like, oh, that's me. That's clearly me with makeup on and a funky hairstyle. But obviously in Rogue One, it's not you. So what were your impressions, going into the premiere, having Tarkin turn around, but seeing Peter Cushing? Was it kind of like a weird experience, or were you just proud of the moment?
I think the lovely producer John Schwartz took me into an editing suite, and Gareth was there very late on in proceedings, actually, and he just showed me a bit, because I think he understood that I was feeling in a vacuum. I didn't know. I kept being called back in to do new bits, and I thought every time I was called back, I thought I was going to be sacked, because it was no good, and it's quite a strange, and they made no secret of the fact that it was a massive thing to do and very important, and of course I knew that. So John, the Schwartz, the producer, very kindly took me in to the editing suite in London and showed me just a few bits, and I was where they'd had a chance to work on. I don't think it was the bit where Tarkin turned round. I think it was another bit, but I did relax a bit. My shoulders did go down a bit, because I thought, oh, well, this is brilliant. This is fantastic what they're doing, and I'm not a total disaster. So butch up, guy, and get on with it, I thought. So I had seen a bit of it. But no, the premiere was, the premiere, I don't remember much about the premiere. It was too much Pinot Grigio.
Well, we've already said about after lockdown meeting up for a pint, so I'm going to hold you to that, Guy.
Thank you.
One of the questions we were going to ask, lastly, from us was: do you have a favourite Star Wars film?
No, I don't. I love them all. I love them so much so that I haven't seen most of them. They're too exciting for me. I'm not an aficionado. I really haven't seen many of them. I'm so sorry if that annoys or upsets people, but I haven't seen most of them, and the bits I have seen, I think they're absolutely brilliant. But for some reason, I don't know why I never really got cottoned on to it when I was young, and maybe I think it's a bit late now. I'm very old. I don't know, but no, I couldn't say, because as I say, I'm not really a very experienced Star Wars watcher, I'm afraid. But I do. What I have learned is how much. Well, I've learned how much people are. They mean to people, these films, and they are. When I have seen them, I thought they were. I can see why people love them. They're all about good and bad, and we need a bit of definition of good and bad in these funny times. I think that's what makes them sort of timeless, because they're like, the old-fashioned fairy tales of good and evil, and I think that's why people love them.
Yep, and you say timeless. You've obviously seen your own film Rogue One through Pinot Grigio eyes, but you still saw it, and it is timeless, and now you're part of that timeless legacy now. So that's something you'll always be able to hold, and people like me who will show my kids, and everyone I know who will show their kids, and will now grow up, and they'll watch you as Tarkin, and they'll see Peter Cushing, and the two will become synonymous, and that's a heck of a thing to be able to say, I think, and I think, as I mentioned before, I think you did such a great job, and I don't mean to blow your trumpet again, but I think you did such a great job, and it's one of the most integral parts of the film, and hats off to you for being able to pull that off.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm not taking light of the whole Star Wars saga at all. I think it's an amazing thing. It's never been one that I've got into myself, but it is something, as I've said, that people love, and to be a part of it like that is one of the best things I've ever had the good fortune to do. So I'm genuinely grateful. even though I'm not a Star Wars fan, I mean, I sort of wish I was, because I meet all these people at the conventions and, generally around and about with people who love the films and things. And I think, I've missed out here then. Perhaps this lockdown that we've been having, and probably going on for a bit, I'm not allowed to go back to acting work for months, I don't think. So I'm a bit fed up with cutting the grass and being a dog walker and a housekeeper. So maybe I'll sit down and start with A New Hope again and watch that again and go through all the Star Wars films ever made. see if I manage that.
Right, you've set yourself a challenge now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for chatting with us, Guy. But before you go, because we know you're a busy man, we know you got your pints to drink and whatnot. We do have a couple questions in from some of our most loyal listeners. They're patrons of the show, and they actually financially contribute to our show. And they have a couple questions for you. Are you okay to answer some of those?
Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Of course I am, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So first up here, we got two questions. They're bolted together because they're kind of similar. And the first one's from Sean Hudson. He says, how did it feel acting in such a well-known role? And how did you prep for the part? How did you get into character? And then Martin Mead also goes on to ask, my wife loved you in Holby. I thought you were superb as Moff Tarkin. What was it like stepping into the shoes of Peter Cushing? Was there any fear or trepidation? Did you enjoy your time on the Rogue One set?
Well, yes. I mean, as I said, it was extremely daunting and challenging, but so what? That's what's exciting. That's what made it's exciting. And yes, I did as much practicing Peter Cushing's movements and voice as I could. My friend Scott Fraser, who's a lovely actor, and he had a little part in the film. But he coached me, and Gareth, I have to say, was brilliant, and so was the dialogue chap who sadly is no longer with us, and he was great. Everybody was extremely helpful, but in the end, I had to finally sort of do my version. I had to sound the best I could while still giving a proper performance, as opposed to some sort of slavish impersonation, which I wasn't really capable of. So it was brilliant, fun, and frightening at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Guy.
Oh, fantastic.
We've got another one from Adrian Chorley, and we've kind of answered these actually during the main discussion, so I'll retool him somewhat. But Adrian wanted to say that he loved your work on Rogue One, and he said it was a groundbreaking and tasteful way to get an essential character into the film. Now, Adrian asked, did you know from day one that you were going for the part that they would be using CGI, which you've mentioned? So I guess on that is, how far into the process of making the film was it decided, actually, yes, we will be compositing a CGI face onto you? And he also asked whether your role went through any changes because of the reshoots, and did you act opposite Vader? So we know you acted opposite Vader, but how long into the shooting process did it take for them to determine, right, okay, we are actually going to go full face composition here?
Well, I think it became quite obvious because it had been talk, I think, at one point that they would film with me as me, or perhaps with some makeup, and also with the motion capture camera on. But fairly swiftly, I think they realised, the technical team, I think they realised that it, all being well, it would work. So I think we stuck with that. And there were various incarnations of the, what went on underneath the motion picture camera. But in the end, I used to go in about 4 or 5 in the morning, and you hold a plastic mask up to your face, like a shield, with lots and lots of holes in it, and the makeup team diligently poke what basically is an eyeliner pencil, black eyeliner pencil, through all these holes, so that every little twitch, every little movement of your own face, my face, became the basis of Peter Cushing's face. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very detailed work, and I mean, I've heard some people have referred to me as a sort of stand-in or a double, and it isn't like that. You know, that is, for better or worse, that is the performance, and you have to really remember that underneath the CGI makeup, there's a real person struggling to get out. And that's why I'm grateful to hear people say, you know, that, well, I like your performance. Some people have said I'd prefer to have seen you without the CGI, which is a very nice compliment. But I think much better that they did it the way they did on this occasion.
Adrian himself actually said he thinks he'd be well capable of playing Tarkin, quote unquote, normally. So there's another one of our listeners who says, you know, had it just been Guy Henry, and let's face it, I may admire when ready, if it had been yourself, you would have been great at doing that.
No, well, thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely. And then we've just got a few more questions. And again, these two are bolted together because there's some similar ones. There's some spiciness at the end of this one as well. But Luke Summerfield from Wales goes on to say, my wife loves you in Holby City. Who was more fun to play, though? Pious Thickness in Harry Potter or Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One? Did you also have to wear Cushing slippers to feel totally in the role? You did a fantastic job, by the way. And then Jimmy Adams goes on to say, did you wear boots or did you keep it real and wear slippers while filming?
I think there's a lot of foot fetish people out there. It's yes, no, I'm afraid they made me beautiful boots, and unlike the real man Peter Cushing, unlike him, I did actually wear the footwear that they made for me, and very comfortable they were too. But he didn't want to, and it's famously so that he wore his carpet slippers. But as I say, in the scene that with Darth Vader that sadly didn't make the final cut, I don't think, I was in my socks and with my knees bent to appear a smaller person than I am. So shorter, I should say. Yeah, it was, that was, I'm sorry, I can't remember. There was a couple bolted together there. What was the rest of the album?
Who was more fun to play, Pious Thickness in Harry Potter or Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One?
Well, obviously the answer is Grand Moff Tarkin. Although you know, Pious Thicknesser was a great character as well, and what an amazing wig! Great long wig all the way down my back, and a very uncomfortable goatee beard. But it was. Oh, we do suffer as actors, but you know, the skin's an organ. You've got somebody else's hair digging into your chin. They're not always very comfy to wear those sort of things. So, in a way, I prefer the motion picture camera and being somebody completely different. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? Pious Thicknesser was one version of me in my acting, and but Grand Moff Tarkin takes it to another league, really, doesn't he? Because he becomes somebody completely different, even though underneath it the performance is mine, you know, is me. So it's a weird and wonderful world being part of these. I mean, I am very fortunate, aren't I? I've been in Harry Potter and I've been in Star Wars, or Rogue One anyway, a Star Wars story. I mean, I did suggest at one point that I should do all the franchises and be in Star Trek. I mean, I could go on forever.
You could be the new Captain America maybe as well. I can see it right now. Well, just before we move on to the last question, I said to my missus I'd let you know that she's also a massive fan of you as Henrik Hansen in Holby City. I mean, you've been doing that for, best part of a decade now, on and off, and Casualty as well. So there's a lot of our listeners, as you've just heard from our questions, who know you best as Dr. Hansen, like the enigmatic surgeon from Holby City. So, again, how does that differ to working on a TV show, a big TV show, to working on a big set like Rogue One? What's the difference in filming those?
Well, extraordinarily, not that much of a difference. You have to try and remember your lines. You have to hit your marks. You have to try to do your best acting when the camera's turning, and also, because the BBC and Pinewood Studios and the films and television world, they often share some of the best technicians. I found, much to my relief, that I was working with quite a few of the technicians from Holby, when I turned up on the Star Wars set, and I just did a little part in a big thing for David Hare on the telly, and again half the crew were off Holby City. So it's one big, usually happy family in a way, which is very, very comforting.
That was interesting. I can imagine, obviously, the British film industry and TV they're all filming in certain locations. So that actually doesn't surprise me, actually, that there are so many people working on the same project. We had one last question, Guy, and it's from Alex Jessup. And he said, "Hey, Guy," he said, "how did you approach the challenge of acting the part and not simply delivering the impression? And did you have any contact at all with the estate of Peter Cushing?"
Well, as I said, I wanted it to be as accurate as I could make it without it being a slavish impersonation, because I'm frankly not capable of it. And Gareth and Bit didn't want it to be so. I have never asked Gareth this, I don't think, but the story is that he was in a hotel room and flicked on the telly, and there was an episode of Holby City, and he thought, that's the guy for us, or something like that. Whether that's true, I must ask him, actually.
Do let us know when you find out.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that makes sense to me. You could easily be in a hotel room and see anybody crop up and think, "Oh, that he'd be good. He'd be good. Let's have a go." And then they've obviously watched some other things I'd done. Perhaps I never really got to the bottom of that. I only know that they decided that I was the one, and that was that, which is extraordinary. Really, I didn't have to do any of the screen tests, as I said earlier. So, very, very fortunate there. But again, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the question because I keep droning on. I'm very famous for going off on a tangent. What's it about?
That's okay. No, Alex, the last part Alex said was, did you at any point have any contact with Peter Cushing's family about the role?
No. Well, he and his wife, who he absolutely loved, they didn't have any children, so there were no children, and at least I think I'm right in saying so. And I did mention earlier that the lady who was at his side as his secretary for years seemed, in fact, to give it her blessing, which we were all, were very, very grateful for. There's one fantastic story about Peter Cushing, because most of you will know that he spent many years in Hammer House of Horror, playing all sorts of frightening people in horror films. And he and his wife, this is apparently, I wish it was a true story. It sounds true, and I'm going to pretend I think it's definitely true. They lived in Whitstable in Kent, and they'd been up to an awards ceremony in London, and they were driving back through the night. This is years and years ago, in a rickety car down through the lanes into Kent. And the car broke down in the middle of a terrible rain and thunderstorm. And Peter Cushing said to his wife, "I can see a farmhouse over there. I will go and look at." I can't do the impression, as you can tell, but not sitting in my office at home. And anyway, to cut a long story short, he marched across the field. And don't forget, he'd been to an awards ceremony, so he was dressed in all the sort of black tie and tails and all their top hat and everything in those days, and looking exactly like Peter Cushing from a horror film. And he rapped on the door of this farmhouse, and the farmer opened the door. A crack of thunder and lightning lit up Peter Cushing standing there in his doorway, and apparently he fainted and fell to the floor. So I really wish that was true.
Fantastic. Guy, it has been so much fun talking to you, and obviously your mark on pop culture will be remembered for a very, very, very long time. And as Star Wars fans, and especially listeners of this podcast, we just want to say thank you, and thank you so much for coming onto our show and giving us your time and talking to us about one of the world's most favourite fantasies. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and it's been a pleasure. I'm sorry there's a slight time lag my end. I think it's my elderly laptop is maybe playing up. I'm sorry if I sound a bit behind the conversation. The fact, of course, that I'm doolally. But no, it's been a pleasure talking to you again, and it was a real pleasure being part of it. Thank you.
No, and we're going to hold you to that point, Guy.
Yes, please. Thank you.